Good evening, dear viewers. Let's start our next update on the war in Ukraine. And today we have an important issues. In my personal opinion, I think that the major Ukrainian offensive have started because we see the massive and concentrated use of Ukrainian forces on the Zaporizhzhia front in directions from Orekhov to Rabotine. And which actually only could mean one thing, that's Ukrainians finally move from the phase of the shaping operations to the phase of decisive operations, where actually they used forces in much larger numbers and actually concentrate them on the certain parts of the front. But let's start with the significant attacks on the ground. Unfortunately, this time they are all coming from the Russians. And two significant from them. One is attack on the Zmyiny Island, where the Russians use FAB 500 guided bombs. And Zmyiny Islands, if you remember, a week ago the President Zelensky visited the island, but he was not the only one who visited the island, because the Russians are reporting that Ukrainians placed the different intelligence units on the Zmyiny Island, and that is now they are actually trying to eliminate Ukrainian presence on the island itself. The other important attack is the attacks on the airfields. Biggest of them, the attack on Starokonstantinov airfield near Khmelnytsky. This is the picture of the airfield, and you clearly can see that the configuration of the airfield. It is a military airfield which was built there in the Soviet time. And also they attack the airfield near Kropivnitsky and Zhytomyr. And the reason for attacking those airfields is that actually Russians believe that Ukrainian Air Force and the planes which are using the Storm Shadow missiles are located in those three airfields. As you remember, in the previous week, Ukrainians conducted several successful attacks on the Crimea, where at least 3 big ammunition depots were destroyed. Also, you see the attacks were conducted in the different towns of Ukraine. And as Ukrainian forces are reporting, they shot down 33 out of the 36 missiles that were targeting the targets in Ukraine. However, Russians are reporting that they launched about 80 missiles. Well, you see, it's a classical example of the fog of war. And because we do not have any visual confirmation of the attacks, so we could not tell which side is more closer to the truth. Nothing significant to report from the activities on the Black Sea and the Kherson front. And now we're moving to the main battle area, the Zaporizhzhia. What we see here is the major attack of Ukrainian forces towards Rabotine, where the elements on 47, 116 and 118 mechanized brigades were involved, and we could easily identify it because of the different types of the equipment they were using. And also the important attack on the Velika Novoselka direction on Staromayorsky and Urozhaine. Well, let's go to the main attack on Rabotine. It's all started, one first interesting element. The attack started with the Ukrainian Air Force strikes over the Russian positions, and this was a time when one of the very few moments in all this war where actually Ukrainians have a local air superiority over that area, and were able to support the attack of the Ukrainian forces. What we saw in that attack, we saw at least 3 battalion tactical groups with altogether up to 90, maybe even more tanks, and the infantry fighting vehicles were used in Ukrainian attack east of Rabotine. There was also one supporting attack which was going in that direction. So, and as you see, as we see the following, so basically the Ukrainians conducted one attack towards Rabotine, where they actually block Russian forces that were staying in Rabotine from any activities and interference with their major attack. And then the major attack went a little bit more south and turned towards the Verbove. And the result of the attack, Ukrainians took control over approximately that part of the territory. So far so good. Unfortunately, we understand that the Russians were massively using the artillery, drones and the helicopters, and Ukrainians do have losses in that attack. So the fighting continues, and we will see what the outcomes of this battle will be, and I will certainly tell you the story about that tomorrow. Ukrainians also attack in the Velika Novoselka direction towards Staromayorsk from two directions as usual, but this time they actually entered Staromayorsk and controlled the part of the settlement. Later on there was also attack towards Urozhaine, however this attack was without any significant results. And if you look into the situation in Staromayorsk, so basically attack went from two directions, from Makarivka and from the Rivnepil, and as a result of those attacks Ukrainians entered the Staromayorsk, and currently they control approximately that northern part of the village, and fighting here is also continues. In the Avdiivka and Donetsk direction, there's Russians activated their forces in the Mariinka region. Well, we remember that the storming, the Russian forces have been storming Mariinka for very long time and still do not control the whole settlement. And now we saw the artillery strikes on the western part of the settlement, and also artillery attacks towards the Krasnohorivka. But here we do not see any significant activities on the ground. One of the reasons why Russians are actually striking those two forces here, they actually trying to probably there was some activities of the Ukrainian forces in the gray zone between Georgievka and the Russian control part of the Mariinka, but attacks towards the Krasnogorivka most likely would happen because the Russians understood all uselessness of the attacks in the Mariinka directions, because they've been conducting those attacks for a very long time, and now you see the whole Ukrainian positions here, where of course there are Ukrainian positions in Georgievka, Maximilianinkovo and Kurakhove. So instead of actually going that way, which will be never-ending storing for the Russian forces and very difficult task to accomplish, I think that they decided to went around it and first take Krasnogorivka. Moving down, the other significant Ukrainian offensive is Klishchiivka, and here unfortunately it's still in the gray zone. What we know for sure that Ukrainians are conducting attacks in different directions, but also what we know that actually Russians are pumping the reserves in and trying to fight the Ukrainians back in Klishchiivka and also in direction of Andriivka. The certain outcome of the fights is unknown, because reports are very contradictory, starting from all Russians withdrew from Klishchiivka to all Ukrainian forces are kicked out of Klishchiivka. So, still gray zone, no decision on how the situation have changed. One important information here: Ukrainians established two pontoon bridges over the canal, and now Ukrainians can uninterruptedly supply forces in that fighting area and also move new forces over the canal. Then again, returning back to my second gray zone question, which I raised a couple of days ago, where's Russian aviation and why they are not attacking the pontoon bridges? I do not have any logical explanation for that. So, but that is good for the Ukrainian forces because they can sustain the fight in Klishchiivka. If you look into the changes, who is controlling what in Klishchiivka? There was currently circulated one video which is coming from the Russians, where we see the Russian troops clearly moving in Klishchiivka near this church, and this is a church on the ground, and this is where it is located in the Klishchiivka. And if you look in the map, it's somewhere here. So technically that means that the Russians are freely moving in the Klishchiivka and definitely controlling all the zone. Yeah, that's true. However, we don't know when the video was filmed. So if it is filmed yesterday, then yeah, Russians control Klishchiivka fully. Well, but then actually this video could be filmed 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, month ago. Then it actually doesn't mean anything. We don't know who is actually controlling those zones. So basically, let's keep it all gray zone for now. And I will adjust the situation on the map when the more credible information would come. There's nothing significant happened on the Seversk-Solidar front, and moving further down to the north, Russians continue the attacks in the vicinity of Zarechny and Torske, and also fights in the Serebryanka forest continues. Now to the main Russian attack on the Kupiansk front, and here we see that the bridgehead from the that's initially started from Karmazinivka have expanded, and the Russians continue movement to the east. Also, we see fights going out of the Novoselivsk and fights in around the Sinkivka. But let's see how the situation changed in the Karmazinivka front. Here it's divided into two parts. Well, what we can know now for sure that Nadia is also under Russian control, and there came some information on how this battle developed. And Nadia is a little village in the in between the two hills here, and there's only one supply route which supplied the Nadia, and it goes like this. What actually happened when the Russians, instead of actually attacking Nadia and risking being set in a crossfire in between the two hills, they actually conducted attack along that road. And when they actually move and took control over this crossroad here, well, then the only logical decision for the Ukrainians, which the only logistical route was cut out, was to withdraw from the village to the better fighting position. Now, the good thing that's actually we see that Ukrainians put some reserve forces in that area, and they counterattacking, and it looks like the front line where it was somewhere around the border between Kharkov and Luhansk regions, it's still there. So basically, the Russians did not move forward in that area. The unknown situation is in Tverdohlebove. There was information that Ukrainians stepped down and moved back to the west. However, there is no confirmation that that have happened. And if you look into how the situation develops here, we see the further to the west, because this, well, we need to understand that this is not very well. The border which is drawn on the ground between the two regions is not a very good defensible positions. The real defensive position which could be defended, it goes through the four villages we have here and the road which goes south to the north. And this is very important defense position. I hope Ukrainians understand that and establish the positions here. Why? Because if you look into the elevation map, then the Ukrainian position should go here, and it is very important to keep it, because if the Russians attack and take that position, control over that area, then actually then it's all the way down the hill to the Barova and to the Oskol River, and there's a virtually none advantages, defense features where actually you can put your defensive positions. Yeah. So basically, then for the Ukrainians, it is extremely important in that area keep this defensive line and do not allow Russians to move further to the west. If you look in the situation which is happening further to the south from the direction of Karmazinivka, here we also see that Ukrainians conducting counterattack and they're not allowing the Russians to move forward. Well, most likely what will happen in the upcoming days, the Russians will move more forces into the bridgehead and do reorganization, and that will take them 1-2 days. And after the reorganization, well, fortunately, we will see another push forward. And I hope that Ukrainians will be ready with their defensive positions in that direction. So there's no more significant information neither from the Kharkiv front nor from the northern border with Belarus. So that concludes my my briefing for today. And the most important news is that I think that a major Ukrainian offensive has started, and Ukrainians move from the shaping phase of the operation to a decisive phase of the operation. And the reason for that is the massive and focused, concentrated use of the forces on the Zaporozhye front. That concludes my report for today. The main message: Ukrainian major counteroffensive have started because we see the more massive and concentrated use of the forces by the Ukrainian army. And that means that they move from the phase of the shaping operation to phase of the decisive operation, and we see their early successes on the Zaporozhye front. However, in order to continue that, we need to see the same pushes tomorrow and day after tomorrow, and and that is a story for the next day. And tomorrow I will tell you about the new developments in the war on the battlefield of Ukraine and the war in Ukraine. But that's all for today. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you all tomorrow.